Now, if you are here for the first time, couldn't have picked a better day to come because we're about to jump into a brand new series today. I want to start today by getting you to think about this. I want you to think about the last time that you had an experience where you were treated unkindly, unfairly, or unjustly. Okay, so maybe something happened and you felt dismissed. Maybe something happened that caused you to feel diminished by somebody. Maybe somebody just ignored you completely. Maybe you were in a situation where somebody took advantage of you. I don't know what it looks like. Maybe you walked in today and somebody said Roll Tide. It could have been that. I don't know. Too soon, Tennessee fans? Too my bad. I don't know what it was for you. I just lost a third of the crowd right there. They're mad at me now. I don't know what it was for you, but I want you to think about that experience, okay? And then I want you to ask yourself this question. When that happened, how did you react? How'd you react? Did you get defensive? Did you get angry? Did you strike back? Did you, like, I'll trade insults with insults? Like, whenever that happened and you felt that emotion inside of you, how'd you react to that experience? It's really important for you to pay attention and for me to pay attention to our reactions, because our reactions tell us something really, really valuable about ourselves. Our reactions tell us a very important story. Now, we all grew up being told by mom that actions speak louder than words, and mom was right. This is true. The thing is, actions only tell part of a story. They don't tell the whole story. And here's all I mean by that. All of us know how to monitor our actions really well. As a matter of fact, you are doing it today. Every time you show up here on Sunday and you walk into quote unquote church, you monitor your actions and you behave a certain way because you want the people around you in this building to see you behaving in a certain way. But my question is, do you always behave as well in other places in your life as you do in church? Oh, y'all are trying. No, you do not. I've seen some of you at sporting events. You do not. We have officials who come to church here and they have stories on you. You do not behave as well other places all the time as you do here, because you pick and choose when you monitor your actions, and so do I. So actions tell part of the story. It's true, actions do speak louder than words. But I'm here to suggest that reactions speak louder than both words or actions, because your reaction to something tells the whole story. Your reaction to something reveals what is going on in here. It reveals what's going on in your heart. Your reactions, if you pay attention to them, let me tell you what's going to show you. It's going to show you how emotionally healthy you are. Your reactions will show you how spiritually mature you are. Your reactions will show you what kind of Jesus follower you are if you claim to be a Jesus follower. So, for the next 3 weeks, as we go through this series, Reactions Speak Louder Than Words, this is going to be one of those series that's going to be really easy to point the finger and think, man, I hope they're hearing this. I hope they're listening. I wish they were here. It's going to be easy to do that. I don't want you to do that. What each of us need to do is look in the mirror and pay really careful attention, be very honest with ourselves about the reactions that we are having. Because our reactions tell us something very, very valuable and important about ourselves. Our reactions tell us the whole story. And whether it's a story we're excited to see or a story that we don't want to hear, we need to own it and acknowledge it and figure out what to do about it so that we can be healthier on the inside. Because while you can monitor actions, you cannot monitor your reactions. So what we're going to do over the next 3 weeks is we're going to try to learn something together that's really difficult. We're going to learn something that Jesus mastered. He taught it and he modeled it. It's what I call the art of the underreaction. Now, for those of you who aren't Jesus followers, you don't consider yourself religious or church people, what we're going to talk about the next 3 weeks is going to be helpful for you, but I just want to say up front, I think it's optional for you. And all I mean by that is I would never look at you and insist that you follow what Jesus had to say, because you don't follow Jesus, okay? So you can figure out what you want to do with this. But for those of us who are Jesus followers, I think we have an obligation, a mandate, to try to master the art of underreaction the way Jesus did it. But it is not easy. Jesus, we all know what an overreaction is, okay? We all understand that. We've seen those plenty of times. Jesus had a way of going as far in the other direction as some of us go in an overreaction. He underreacted as strongly as some of us overreact in different situations. And he constantly was looking at his followers and either getting on them when they overreacted or encouraging them to underreact, because he knew every time those of us who claim to follow Jesus, every time we overreact, we miss a really, really unique opportunity. A unique opportunity to bring good out of a situation and a circumstance where maybe nobody else sees good. So what I want to do today is I want to start by introducing some of the teachings Jesus had where he instructed all of us to underreact. I mean, he talked about different situations, and he would say, in this situation, underreact. And then when this happens to you, underreact. And when this happens to you, here's how you underreact. And I need to give you two warnings before we read this, all right? First of all, these teachings from Jesus are really easy to misunderstand and misapply. Now, I know how when you're listening to me, sometimes your mind drifts other places. So I'm trying to get all of you back to hear this, or I'm going to get an email this week because you've misunderstood something I said later when you tune back in. All right, so if you're with me, I want you to hear this is really easy to misunderstand and misapply. All right, so you gotta listen carefully to the way I explain this and what I'm going to say, because this has been misapplied in a lot of different situations in a lot of different churches. I don't want you to do that. This is the instructions Jesus are giving. Do not apply in any way to dangerous situations. We'll talk more about that in a minute. The second warning I need to give you is this, that these teachings, and this may be the temptation for a lot of us, they're really easy to ignore and dismiss. When I read this, you're going to be like me, I would imagine. You're going to read that and think, well, yeah, that's great in theory, but in reality, but if I did that, I would never win at life. But if I did that, people would run over me. But if I did that, like, because this just isn't the way the world works. This isn't the way people react and respond. So it's going to be really easy to ignore it and to dismiss it. I just want to remind you before we read them that the guy who taught these and the guy who modeled these, well, he made a greater impact on the world than all of us combined ever will. So as easy as it is to say, well, you can't live life that way and actually get anything done in life or have good relationships or whatever, the reality is Jesus modeled the exact opposite for us. And as shocking as these may sound to us, imagine that you were a first century Jew sitting on a hillside the day Jesus taught this. You're under Roman rule, and he's looking at you, and he's saying this. He's saying things like, and you've heard this, Jesus said to him, you have heard that it was said, eye for eye and tooth for tooth. To which we all go, well, yeah, that's common sense. You know, somebody does something to you, you're just not going to let them get away with it. You're going to try to even the score somehow. Matter of fact, we still to this day, do we not sometimes cheer for people who find a way to even the score? We cheer for people. You watch TV shows where you are rooting for the character who has been mistreated, and when they get revenge, you're like, there it is, right? That's a whole thing in the plot line you've been waiting on. It just seems like common sense to us. But Jesus says, wait a minute. If you are following me, I'm looking for a different reaction. He says, but I tell you, do not resist an evil person. Now, he is not referring to a situation where you need self-protection. Okay, so he's not referring to you're in a situation with a dangerous person and they're going to physically harm you or emotionally harm you in some way and you just got to let them do it. That's not what he's saying. He is actually referring to retaliation. So he's saying when you find yourself in a situation and somebody takes advantage of you, they wrong you in a significant way, what's your reaction? I don't want your reaction to be retaliation. I want you to underreact. I don't want you to avoid what's natural, which is trying to get back. And he starts giving us examples of what this looks like. He gets way too practical. He goes on to say this, if anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. Now again, this is not about physical harm and self-defense. If you were in the first century in Jewish culture, you would have understood exactly what I was referring to. So basically in the first century culture, if you wanted to insult somebody, the way you did it was, most people were right-handed, right? So they would take their right hand, they would open their hand up, and they would just pop somebody on the right cheek, and that was a way of diminishing them. That was a way of insulting them. That was a way of saying, I'm better than you, and you're not worth that. This is what Jesus is referring to. He's not saying, man, if somebody punches you and you get in a fight, you just got to be a pacifist. That was not it at all. He's saying, how do you react when somebody insults you? How do you think most people in the first century reacted? Somebody walked up to you and slapped you on the cheek, you would turn around and slap them back. You were going to return an insult for insult. And Jesus is asking, all right, well, what would it look like for you to underreact to that? What would it look like when somebody insulted you? For you to refuse to return that insult with insult. For you to instead just let it go. To which we all go, well, that gives them a chance to insult us more. And that's his point. What if you could master the art of underreaction when you were insulted? He goes on and gives another example. He says, if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with them 2 miles. Okay, so back in the first century, in Jewish culture, they had what was called compulsory public service. Here's basically what it meant. If there was someone who had more power than you, was in a leadership position in the community, a Roman soldier, okay, the Romans may have even introduced this. If there was somebody who was seen as more powerful than you, and they saw you in public, and they walked up to you and said, I want you to carry all my stuff. You had no choice. You were required, because they were above you, to pick up all of their things, however much it was, and you were required to carry it 1 mile. Can you imagine how much that got abused? Can you imagine if we had that today? Can you imagine letting some teenagers a hold of that idea? It's just, anyway, so it's one of those deals where when somebody walked up to you and said, you got to carry my stuff for me, you would carry it because you had to, but you wouldn't do it because you wanted to. And so what they were known to do, it makes sense. They would measure their steps. And the minute they hit 1 mile, they dropped that stuff and they gave a look of disgust and they would walk away. This was normal. And here Jesus is. And he's looking at these Jewish people under Roman rule who no doubt are dealing with this as Roman soldiers come up to them all the time. And he says to them, no. If somebody comes up, if a Roman soldier walks up and asks you to carry something for them 1 mile, when you hit the 1 mile mark, just go ahead and take it a 2nd mile for them. Just go ahead and go a little further. Don't make them ask you to. Don't just do the minimum required. Now, I know we don't have this today, but here's where this intersects with our lives. How do you react when somebody treats you like a servant? You've had this happen to you, right? Where somebody has walked up to you and expected something of you, asked something of you, just interacted with you in a way that you're like, who do they think they are? I'm not going to do that for them. Why do they expect me to? How do you react when you're treated like a servant? What happens in your heart when somebody treats you as if you're required to serve them? That's what Jesus is trying to get us to identify and acknowledge. And then, as if this wasn't bad enough, he gets into our financial reactions. He says, here's what else I want you to do. I want you to give to the one who asks you and do not turn away from the one who wants to borrow from you. Now, again, you need a little cultural context here. So, the rich and the poor in the first century in the Jewish world, they would often interact. They were living near each other. They were interacting at the temple. They were around each other all the time. And so when somebody who was poor was asking someone who had more than enough to give them something, this wasn't a cheap handout. This is not what Jesus is referring to. This wasn't somebody who was too lazy to go to work. In most cases, whenever somebody was asking, it was because there was a legitimate survival need, okay? These were people who didn't have enough food, clothing, or shelter. And so they were looking at somebody who had more than enough, and they were either saying, would you be willing to be generous and to help meet a need I have? Or, in some cases, they were saying, hey, would you just give me a loan so I can provide food, clothing, and shelter for my family? Now, what made that tricky, if you loan the money to them, is there was another Jewish custom called the year of Jubilee. Every 7 years, all debts got forgiven. So imagine that it's year 6.5, and I come up to you and I'm like, would you just please loan me some money? Because I can't provide food, clothing, and shelter for my family. And at that point, what are you thinking? You're thinking, you don't have enough time to pay it back, which means I'm just going to lose the money. My generosity would be way too much of a risk. And that is exactly what Jesus was getting at. He was looking at them, he was looking at us, and he's saying, when you see a legitimate need, how do you react? Now, this one hits close to home because we've just been doing this, right? And last night as I was going over this one more time, it dawned on me, well, here we are. We've just been going through our offering, and we've been talking about all the, we give every penny away. We've been talking about how we're going to help these nonprofits, and they're going to help people with food, clothing, shelter. I mean, it's exactly the exact same thing. And so you just ask yourself a question. How did you react when you heard about the opportunity for all of us to participate in something that was going to help that many people? How'd you react? You should be honest with yourself about that. Were you excited about it? Oh my gosh, I just love the fact we got these opportunities to impact, tens of thousands of lives. Or were you like, I'll tell you what, when does this get over? I'll come back when that series is done, Or when is he ever going to stop talking about money? I wasn't actually talking about money. I was talking about vision and the impact we can make. But that's a whole nother conversation. What was going on inside of you? And I'm not being critical. I'm saying you owe it to yourself to pay attention to what your actual reaction was in your heart, because it tells the whole story. It might clue you into something that you didn't even realize was there, you had justified, excused away, that's hurting your relationships with the people closest to you and might be diminishing your relationship with God, and you didn't even know it was there. And if this isn't hard enough for all of us, me included, then Jesus looks at them and he says this: you have heard that it was said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. To which they were all like, yeah. Once again, we're back to common sense. You're not going to flip this one, are you? And he says, oh yeah, I'm going to flip this one. He says, but I tell you, I want you to love your enemies, and I want you to pray for those who persecute you. To which, if we were honest, we would say, I can't even remember to pray for the people I like. So I don't know that I'm going to pray for the people who are out to get me. I certainly don't know how I'm going to love my enemies. And Jesus is going, no. This is what it takes. I am asking you, if you follow me, and if you don't, you may be lucky today because you're off the hook. But for those of us who follow him, this is Jesus saying, you have to master the art of the under-reaction. I want you to under-react. When somebody comes after you, when somebody wants harm for you, when somebody, if they had the opportunity, they would do something that would hurt you. He says, every time you see them, every time you get a chance, you know what I want you to do? I want you to love them. I want you to kill them with kindness. I want you to pray that good things happen to them. Why in the world would we ever do that, Jesus? He says, well, actually, it's pretty simple. He says, I want you to do this so that you may be children of your Father in heaven. Now, he's not saying if you do this, you got a relationship with God. If you don't, you don't. Here's what he's saying. He's saying your reactions actually reveal who you are. Your reactions either look like your heavenly Father's or they don't. And you can say all you want to say about how much you love God. And I can show up here every week and I can say all I want to say about how much I love God. And you can, stand and sing songs and you can sit in rows and listen to me speak. We can do all of that. But the people who are not following Jesus that we interact with every day, they're actually not paying attention to our words. And they're not even entirely giving credibility to our actions. The trump card is our reactions. And this is Jesus' way of saying, if you want to introduce those people to what their heavenly Father is like and how much he loves them, then they better see it in your reactions. They better see it in you, because your reactions reveal who you are, and sometimes your reactions will show you whose you are. And when you pause and think about that, this is where it gets tough, because maybe that separates us. Maybe this is what separates those of us who in name are like, well, I'm a Christian, I love God, from those of us who are actually trying to follow Jesus and do what he says. Christians don't worry about underreacting. I'm just a church person. You don't have to worry about underreacting, coming to church, sitting in a row. I mean, I may make you mad sometimes. You get mad at me, but you don't really have to worry about it because you're well behaved here. But whether or not we're really Jesus followers, Well, our reaction is going to show us that. It's going to separate which of us are consumers. I show up for what I can get out of it. And which of us are surrendered. God, whatever you say, I'll obey. I'm just going to do my best to follow you. Why would we do that? We would do that because I guess I need to remind us all that Jesus, our King, underreacted to our sin by dying for it to pay for it. Think about this. If you were God and you had created human beings so you could love human beings and so they could know and experience your love, and you had created a perfect world to put them in, and they had chosen of their own will and accord to rebel against you, to make a mess and a wreck of their relationship with you, their relationship with each other, and their relationship with the world that you had created. They broke everything. What would you do? What reaction would you have to that rebellion and betrayal? This is the most over-under reaction you could possibly get. None of us, if we had been presented that scenario, would have ever guessed this was how the story was going to turn out. But when Jesus saw our rebellion and our sin, this is what he's done for us. He reacted by offering grace, forgiveness, love, mercy. We could go on and on. So for those of us who follow Jesus, we should not be surprised, I don't think, that Jesus turns around and Jesus insists that we react to others like he reacts to us. So over the next few weeks, we're going to talk about what this looks like in every single area of life. But here's where I want to start this week. I was thinking about, okay, what do we need to do with this as we walk out of here? And maybe some of you are overachievers, but I think for most of us, for me to stand here and say, all right, you got to line all your reactions this week when people do things, you got to line them all up to what Jesus would do. I mean, if we're honest, somebody gets on our nerves and we overreact. And we can't even handle that one, much less the really deep, painful, difficult stuff. So I was like, what's a good first step? And I don't know, this may be the hardest step, but here's where I think we should start. I want to invite you this week to join me in practicing how to underreact at home, just at home. Keep being a jerk to everybody else, okay? Those officials, when you're at the sporting events, just scream at them, and when you're done, just tell them you go to another church. But just go ahead, don't worry about fixing everything. Let's just confine this to home. I want you to think about when you are with your family, or for some of you, when you are with your roommates, whatever your situation is, whenever you're home, I want you to think about what other people do that disturbs you or upsets you. I don't need to give you time to figure that out, do I? I want you to pick one of those things, because you probably have a list. I want you to pick one of those things. Somebody in your family or a roommate or whatever, something they do that angers you, it gets on your nerves. Now, I want you to ask yourself this question. What would a Jesus underreaction look like when they did that thing? And if Jesus were in your shoes and he walked by and saw they'd left the dishes out one more time, or they hadn't started the dishwasher, they just left their stuff strewn all over the house, or they were playing their music too loud, or there they were hogging the TV, I don't know, whatever it is. What would a Jesus reaction look like in that situation? Probably not what we do, but I bet you could guess what he would do. So here's what I want you to try to do. Whether you're a Jesus follower or not, I think this would be a great exercise. I want you this week, just in that situation at home, whenever it pops up, because you know it will, whenever it pops up, and you're just about to overreact and to say the thing, or to make the barb, or to give the look, whatever. I want you to catch yourself, and I want you to choose to underreact and mimic what you think Jesus would do. Now, I'm kind of setting you up for failure, because let me tell you what you're going to find. You're not going to be very good at this. One of the things you need to know is I work on this content at least 2, sometimes 3 months out, which is miserable for me, because I have 2 or 3 months where I'm trying to practice this and I realize how bad I suck at it, okay? So you might be better than me at this, but my guess is you're going to have a similar experience where you're not awesome. So I want to remind you of something. If you follow Jesus, You do not have to do this on your own. If you do not follow Jesus, good luck, more power to you. But for those of us who follow Jesus, he promised that when we began following him, he put his Spirit inside of us, which means we have access to the same power Jesus had. So maybe what we need to do is wake up every morning this week and say, okay, if this happens today, Jesus, would your Spirit please give me the power and the ability to react your way instead of my way, to underreact instead of overreact. And then just see what happens. Now, here's why I want you to try this. One, you're going to realize and discover you can be way more dependent on God than you thought you could, and he'll show up and make a difference. But the other thing you're going to discover, if you are able to begin to react like Jesus would in those situations, you're going to realize that your opportunity for the greatest good, for the greatest impact, may actually be in those moments where people treat you unfairly, unjustly, or unkindly. Your opportunity for your greatest impact may be in those moments when people are doing something that gets on your nerves. Because according to Jesus, when you are able to underreact, when you're able to return good for evil, or you're able to return patience instead of frustration, and you're able to respond with love instead of disdain, you are going to discover that the impact that has on you, on your heart, on what's going on inside of you, on your emotional health, your spiritual maturity, and the impact it has on the people around you that you love, on the relationships that you actually care about, well, it just might solve some of the problems you've been having. It just might help you learn to love people the way you actually want to love them and to be the person you actually want to be. Jesus was a master of the art of underreaction. And aren't we all glad he was? Aren't we all glad he still is? And if we're going to claim to follow Jesus, maybe we should let him teach us how to do it too. Let me pray for us. Father, this is so difficult to do on our own. So would you give us the wisdom and the awareness to recognize when we're about to overreact this week? Would your Spirit just, tap on our hearts, catch our attention, and remind us, oh, wait a minute, there's an alternative here. And then would you give us the power to underreact the way you would underreact and the way you have underreacted to us? To react in a way that demonstrates your love and your grace and your mercy. And in the process, help us to be aware of the stuff rattling around in our hearts that maybe is more harmful than we realize. We've just been justifying it. And we want to surrender that and give you freedom to begin to clean that out, so we can be the people and love people the way we've always wanted to be. It's in your name we pray. Amen.